Hi, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here and thankful to Alfred for inviting me to be a part of this with all of you. My name is Sophia Miller, and today we are talking about no experience necessary and what that means when we're talking about making music with our singers and musicians who we consider beginning and intermediate in our spaces. I want to start by introducing myself a little bit, but I want to introduce myself in a way that is sort of adjacent, virtually adjacent to a warm up that I sometimes like to do in the room, or an icebreaker. And it's really a good icebreaker I love to find something that is kind of nice for any group of any size, at any age, and even at multiple points throughout the year. And it's an exercise called Who Am I? And we won't be able to exactly mimic it in this forum, of course, but I am going to ask you to participate in this a little bit. So there are so many things that make up the multitudes of who we are. And this icebreaker really celebrates that by having everyone in the room pair off and for, let's say, 30 seconds or 45 seconds or however much time you designate, maybe even a full minute, one person in that pair is going to over and over ask the question, who are you? And the other person will respond, I'm Sophia. Who are you? I am a musician. Who are you? And so on and so forth. And the other person gets to respond with anything that makes up their identity. And it can go in all kinds of different directions. So in that spirit, I introduce myself to you by answering some of the things I might say if we were playing that game together, just something to uplift and celebrate all of the things that make us who we are. I like to find ways also to ask us things beyond how we identify or what we do, especially in adult scenarios. We're often asked, "So what do you do?" And I think that is a beautiful question. And also, I do many things, and often I'm inclined to answer that question professional about my profession, um, and that's great. And also, how would I respond if I simply just answer the question, who are you? By asking that question, I get to answer in the ways that feel personal, professional, maybe things I wouldn't even say aloud to the whole room, not because they're a secret, but because there doesn't quite seem to be an opportunity to do so or an appropriateness to doing so. But paired off one-on-one, I might say it to somebody next to me. And so I invite you too to ask, I ask you, who are you? And you have an opportunity in your chat amongst yourselves, if you would like to take this moment to just drop in something or some things about your identity and how you might answer the question, who are you? I invite you to share that amongst yourselves for just a moment now. And as you drop those responses into the chat, I just offer a moment to uplift the many folks joining us from many parts of the country, from many different disciplines, from different levels of experience, and from just lots of different perspectives and shared values and differing values, and so much to bring to the table. So I appreciate you taking that moment to just share who you are. I want you to think about this question. I start today by asking you, do you consider yourself an artist? And just think about that for yourself for a moment. And if we were in the room together, I might ask you all to raise your hands if you consider who in here considers themselves an artist. And I often find that hands I spring into the air. Sometimes they go up timidly as if to say, "Oh, right. Yes, I am that, right? Yeah, I forgot." And sometimes they don't go up at all. And so I ask you to consider for yourself whether you would call yourself an artist. And I ask, what level of experience do you believe is required to be an artist? And I would pose that my answer is none. My nephew and I were playing a game where we would draw a number on the board, and the other person, he's 5, the other person had to use the number to draw something. And so I drew the number 8, and he drew this snowman showing up on the bottom corner of your screen. And my 5-year-old nephew is an artist just simply by the nature of having the tools before him to create something and the imagination to do so with little to no experience. So then I ask, who even are the people that we're talking about today? I mentioned beginning and intermediate singers, and you may have picked up on the fact that I mentioned nothing about age. And the reason I mention nothing about age is because we have beginning and intermediate singers at every stage of life: infants, toddlers, children, pre-adolescents, teenagers, young adults, less young adults, older adults, aging adults, elderly adults. We have beginning and intermediate singers showing up in all of our spaces. And I I share here just a photo of my church choir at First Unitarian Congregational Society in Brooklyn. I sing with, song lead, and assistant direct and sub music direct this choir. And they are a choir full of folks who, in some cases, make a profession out of their musical lives. In some cases, just simply love to sing. Here we're pictured with the Lavender Light Gospel Choir in New York City. And these are folks who, as I said, some of them are professional musicians. Very few of them are that, and most of them are beginning and intermediate singers. And by that, I also don't always take beginning to mean at the beginning of their experience. That might mean that I also have an adult community choir that I see on Wednesday nights. And just this past year, I had somebody join who said to me, "I have not sung in a choir since middle school." And I said, "Amazing, welcome." And I might offer that that person in their own way is a beginner as well, or having a restart of their experience. So beginning and intermediate singers, we often think of as young singers. They can span any age and in any space. And with those rare exceptions of pro or semi-pro ensembles, we really do see them everywhere. Um, or we see lots of musicians with various levels of experience in other capacities of making music. So perhaps they've been singing for a long time, but even in the college setting, you may have singers who are coming in as vocal majors, music education, performance, all of those things. They may be more experienced singers, but they might not be as experienced in some of the skills that we build as musicians that are inherent in some of the ways that we continue to form those building blocks in theory, in oral skills, in all of those ways. So even into that collegiate world, we see some beginning and intermediate level skills with our singers as well. And I want to share today that I deeply believe that we are able to build art, agency, and artistry in all of our spaces, not regardless of the ages and levels of experiences in the room, but actually in celebration of it. And so there are a few different ways that I like to kind of hold up the various components that I find make all of this possible and attainable, and not just things that sort of pepper our experience or things that we kind of bring in from time to time, but actually culture building in our spaces. And I'm going to talk today about a lot of different, if we were in the room together again, I would bring us through some experience. I will bring us through some experiences together that I'll lead you through. And I think that we would be able to go a little bit deeper if we were in the room today, but I will speak to and guide you through some of this as best I can here. Um, I actually attended a presentation yesterday. It was one of my favorite things that I saw open the presentation was there was a slide up and at the top it said, "What we'll try to cram into this hour." And I thought, oh, that is so true. So that's what we'll try to cram into this time together. But the first thing, and I say the first thing, these are in some ways in no particular order, but something that I find just deeply, deeply important in all of my spaces is building a culture of presence and mindfulness. And that comes into play in a lot of different ways in the music making process for me. But I start really early on in the year, and depending now, something that I'll share with you about sort of my world is that I've already mentioned two adult community choirs I work with. There's a third I work with as well. Um, and I also work with children's choirs ages 7 to 18. I have sort of a primary niche in the age 7 to 14 treble world. That's where I sort of find myself landing when it comes to my work with children and young people. And so I find that I hold great value in finding ways really early on in the new season with children and adults alike, teenagers, everybody, to build a culture of presence and mindfulness. And that can look different ways in your different spaces. But there are a lot of components that go into building and maintaining and then calling upon those practices such that you are cultivating that culture, as I said, in your spaces that you can call upon and that expands upon your music making as well. So I pose that the tangible ways we can build presence and mindfulness are infinite. And so what I hope to offer in this moment is to say to you, whatever it looks like for you, I really want to encourage you to explore it. There are lots of presence and mindfulness and practices that are artistic in their very nature that look at breath work and meditation and focus. There are also so many ways to acknowledge all that shows up within our spaces, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Also building a culture of awareness of ourselves and one another so that there are ways in which we can check in with ourselves. And again, I find adults need this just as much as children. Checking in with ourselves, being mindful of our neighbor and folks across the room as well. And all of this for me leads to a place where centering and recentering actually replaces a culture of commanding, where instead of being in the front of the room and calling to attention in some of the ways that we might consider doing, which a lot of us have really musical, beautiful tools of calling the room to attention. But sometimes it's not just about calling the room to attention at the start of rehearsal or at the start of class. It's about recalling to attention and or in those moments when talking gets out of hand for whatever reason and or we are finding ourselves likely to scold for talking. What about if these presence and mindfulness practices actually build a way for us to have different tools to call us back? And I don't offer that completely as a replacement idea for all of the various ways that you manage your classroom spaces, but rather in addition to. Because I think that this work fosters creativity, artistic expression, and builds a playful space. And within a playful space, there are so many times I know that I laughing and playing is so high priority for me, and I often find that it is to my own detriment that I might lose the room. And so that was part of my inspiration for discovering ways that I could say, okay, I have this room of 7 to 10-year-old children, 70 of them in the room. And I want the laughter, I want the play, I want that joyfulness. And I recognize that being willing to visit those places also means being willing to understand what comes after. And sometimes what comes after is the child who's turning to their neighbor and just carrying on and all of those things. And I thought, oh, I don't actually want to laugh and play and have joy and then say, now hold on, come back. And the minute one day that I ever found myself doing that many years ago, I thought, no, I have to build a better way because I'm not going to take from myself or from these children in their space. I'm not going to take the joyful play and fun from the experience. I'm instead going to counterbalance it with, and I don't even know if counterbalance is quite the right, it's not in counter to, it is in continued celebration of what we're doing here, so that there's just a respect for all of the many modes of existence that we can go through. So, to speak to some of these a little more specifically, there are a lot of different ways that you can do. I'm going to talk about breath work for a moment first. There are a lot of different ways that you can focus on breath work. Um, when I say breath work, I really mean anything that calls attention and focus and just existing within the breath. I believe that often we are very good about breath work warm-ups that are sort of instantly in rhythm or start us in a place of engaging for singing or engaging, for making music. And I really love to take that one step back and engage in breath work for the sake of breathing. Um, there are times in which that type of work might look like an inhale and an exhale, and that's it. But I believe that by front loading with a more expanded version of that, that the later version that might be just a quick moment of it becomes more effective. So for example, I might ask the room, and as I'm going to ask you now, I'm going to ask you to come to a place where you are feeling comfortable in your seat. And that might mean that you lean back. Your idea of a comfortable seat might be that it's a more active body sitting tall. Maybe your idea of a more comfortable seat is actually sitting on the floor or away from your device. And if that feels good to you, all you need to be able to do right now is hear my voice. And so I want to invite you into a moment of finding that space that feels comfortable to you. And if you feel secure in doing so in your current surroundings, I encourage you to close your eyes. And in this moment of closing your eyes, I just want you to take a moment to notice your body. Notice your breath. You don't have to change a thing about it. Notice your body. Notice whether your body feels settled in this comfortable position that you have been encouraged to find. And if it doesn't quite yet, use your next inhale and exhale to settle into a more comfortable position. And if there's something in your body that feels like it is not at rest, or it still has some wiggles or some stretching to do, use your next couple of inhales to move through the movement that your body is currently asking for. And in just a couple more breaths, see if you can invite your wiggles and movement to find a place of stillness, even if just for a few moments. And as your own awareness of your own body comes to the center of your focus, notice the sounds that surround you. You might be in a space that you are sharing with other people and you are feeling aware of them in some manner. You might be in a space where you are near a window and there are sounds outside, traffic, birds. You might be in a place of work where other sounds of your own surroundings are taking place. And I would ask that you notice them and allow them in. Whatever they may be, they're part of our space. And perhaps a door opens and shuts, and let's think about two different ways that we can think of that. The door opening, interrupting our moment, or with our eyes closed, maybe it's possible that the door opening is a person entering the room who you are so excited to see. And in that spirit, invite all of the sounds in. And as you take another couple of breaths, I want to also offer that whatever you have brought with you today into this space, I invite you to sit with it. Perhaps you are having a day full of great joy and energy and fun, or perhaps your day has brought you to a place of sorrow or pain or challenge. Whatever your space is in that spirit, invite it to be in this space with you today and sing with you today and breathe with you today. And on your next inhale, I'm going to invite you to take a collective inhale together and a collective exhale. And in again through your nose. And exhale through your mouth. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and join us together in this space again. I do a fair amount of this type of guided experience that doesn't always look exactly the way that I just showed you. In fact, the one step further that I didn't take it just then is that I would actually go into a more of a guided breath moment where I would have us all inhaling and doing box breathing together. And what I typically do with that, and box breathing is when you inhale for 4 counts, hold. I actually do the hold for 2. So I guess you could call that rectangular breathing. Well, the boxes can be rectangular. But I inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 4, hold for 2. And the inhale is always through the nose, exhale is through the mouth. And usually what I'll do is count us all through 2 of those, and I'll invite everyone to do 5 more on their own, and I'll know that you are ready to be back with us when you have finished your 5 breaths and your eyes open. This takes time. But this is what I mean by later, there are things to recall upon because you did a front loading of something. So a lot of times, I do this all the time, and I insist on continuing to do it, even though every time I do it, I always end up engaging in conversations afterward where people say to me, here is my situation, here's how many minutes I have in the week, and here's all of the different parameters. And I love that idea, and I simply don't have time to do it. And I would love to encourage you to explore the thought, the reframing, that you don't have time not to do it. I have found that it has given back to me in such dividends that I'm like, oh, I actually saved time in the end. In the end, I got a lot back because what I discovered through it and what we discovered in the room together and the ways that we come back were so far greater of a refocus than any other if I had taken all of the other, moments together of calling the room to attention or recalling the room, I would have discovered that I got so much of that time back. And so the math of it all for me is both that you get all of that time and that you have built this beautiful culture of now next week, I might be able to do a slightly truncated version because if I do feel like my minutes that week are feeling really precious, I'm still able to incorporate the practices that, and this is a practice. So it is important to find ways to integrate this in all of the different ways you can. There was a particular kind of era of time with my 7 to 10 year old ensemble that I've had where we ended up incorporating when we inhaled, and now I have kept this forever and ever and ever. When we did an inhale, we actually lifted our arms up. We did, and on the exhale, dropped our arms down. And it became actually a physical way that I could call them into breath without having to say, and now let me set up all of this breath stuff. All I had to ever do was lift my arms up once, and both arms, it's hard for me to show you both, but up. And inevitably it becomes one of those things that 5 children in the room notice and start doing with you, and then it catches on. So now by the time you've gotten to your 5th breath, there are some children who have been there with you for all 5. There are some who caught on breath 3, but either way, it's a nonverbal way to call attention back to the room. There is a wonderful teacher and mentor of mine who I'll share in just a couple of moments, who does a stunning storytelling breath work practice. And I'm going to point you to a resource of hers in a little bit, where you just, again, you get to explore it. There are just so many ways to explore the idea that just taking a deep breath for any one of us is just feels amazing. And there's almost no one who would argue with you about that. And so children too, when they take in that breath and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel incredible and I want to be here and I want to be present. Um, I've spent a majority of my career in the children's choir world. And so, I've worked with the Young People's Chorus of New York City for a very long time, as well as Boston Children's Chorus and Savannah Children's Choir in Georgia. And I'm often told, the children in your spaces want to be there. They audition, they show up there, they extra love singing. And I am in a school where the children are required to take this. And my first teaching experience was the world where it was everybody in the 5th and 6th grade choir, no matter what, and all of those things. And so I understand both vantage points are true. And I would just offer that regardless, they are children and human beings in the space who still all need this type of care. My Wednesday night adult choir, they show up, having come from their days of work and crossing the park, and you know the UN is in session and you can't get anywhere and it's raining and it's all these things, and they come in and they're just like, all right, well, I made it, and I guess now that I'm here, I guess I'll do anything about it and open my mouth a little bit and really kind of come in to through no fault of their own with this weight. And my offer is to say, let me welcome you into a space where we take deep breaths, and we can call upon that at any time. So those are some of the practices that I mentioned. And also, I have really unsubscribed from the idea of leaving everything at the door, as you will have noticed in the way that I asked you all to think about the spirit that you show up in today. Is it one of joy? Is it one of sorrow? Is it one of medium, and I don't I am not able to leave my things at the door. It doesn't mean I can't do my job, but I do know that they sit with me as a human being. And so I think that in an acknowledgement, and this is where I say acknowledging all that shows up within our spaces, I think that in that breath work, in an acknowledgement of saying, I see you, and I know that you just had a day, and I know you might have gotten an amazing score on that test, or you might be fighting with your sibling, or you might be, all of those things might be true, or some of them might be. I get to say, oh, I see you and I see that you're human. And we are really going to focus on singing in here today, but I haven't forgotten all the humanness that you are. And so that is where that comes in for me of, yes, let's notice the doors that are opening and shutting. And there was a time in my life where I would like shoot my glance to the door, like, did that person really have to come in just then when I was making it all zen in here? And the truth is that the world does not stop. It doesn't stop around us, and someone does come in late, or someone doesn't realize that you were in this room today, or whatever it is. And I'm like, okay, then talk about the fact that the door opened, or I can talk about the fact that the principal made an announcement just as we were in this moment of quiet. It's okay. We can work with and not combat those external factors, including the ones we bring into the room. So I find all of that to be really important. And why is this important for beginning and intermediate singers? Why does this belong in this session? It's because I believe that that is all a part of the creative process. And I believe that the beginning and intermediate singers, and in this case, perhaps I am really kind of focusing on that young age group, that 7 to 10-year-old group I keep referencing. I think they deserve to have as artistic a process as anybody else. So that really is part of it for me, of just pulling it all the way back for them. I want to, as artistic practices go that may extend beyond um, meditative and breath practices, I want to point you to a book you may or may not know about. Called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and just really encourage you, if you can, to do it or do it again. And indeed, I do mean do it. It's a very active book. It's a 12-week program, and the chapters are listed as such. And it's just in a reclaiming of and a nurturing of, in a discovery of your own artistry, you as the artist, and how that discovery can lead to a lot of discoveries in your rehearsal and classroom spaces too. Um, I really recommend doing it with a friend or I did it with a book club. It's a really fun way it's very active. And at the end of each chapter, there are lots of tasks that you can choose from to do that week. And some of them are simply taking a walk for 30 minutes or something like that. But um, it's a really, really special way to tap into creative things that, if you do say, yes, I consider myself an artist, and that's great, but most of your artistry is rooted in your musicianship. This is kind of a way of, like, encouraging you to maybe write or maybe draw or maybe color or maybe make music or maybe take a photo with a different lens, in ways that tap into all the things that make you creative. And so I can't recommend that enough as a artistic practice that will boost you and show you opportunities for boosting your students as well. So the next sort of component for me is improvisation and physicalization, which has to do with, kind of going back to the idea of exploring artistry, going back to just playful ideas, storytelling, sound exploration, moving your body, using your voice powerfully. And powerfully does not mean loudly. Powerfully can mean with the choices that you make with your notes, with with your text, with what is the idea of using your voice powerfully, and what is the idea of exploring musicality and musicianship through all these things. So how could storytelling be musical? What does that mean if we take a book and read through it as a musician, as an artist, as a person exploring a creative practice? How can that help our musicianship? How can we discover dynamics in telling a story? There are lots of different ways to put those things to the experience that go outside of the music making that we do. And the other resource with this in mind that I want to point you to is, and this is who I mentioned before, is an artist called Rhiannon, and this is her book. It's called Vocal River: The Skill and Spirit of Improvisation. And I missed an I in the word improvisation. Um, so Rhiannon is an incredible, incredible artist who was part when Bobby McFerrin began his voicestra vocal improvisatory ensembles back in the 80s. Rhiannon was a part of his ensembles, and now it works alongside him and in her own right on his famed circle singing school. She has her own curriculum. She calls her curriculum Vocal River and does a lot of workshops. And there are a lot of and there's also a recording that you can find on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever well, anyway, wherever you listen to music, you can find also an improvisatory set of recordings as well, called Flight. And Rhiannon is taking you through vocal exercises, encouraging you to improvise harmonies with her. There are things you can use in your classrooms. There are things you can use for your own development. And she, for example, has a chapter in there where she describes a breath experience where she actually is taking you on a journey through the idea of breath, that you are a grounded person as a tree with roots. There was a time, she lives in Hawaii, and I did a workshop with her recently where she did breath work as a volcano. And because volcanoes, that's, if you live in Hawaii, they're on your mind. She just described the idea of the inhale being this lava rising and the exhale being lava falling. And it's so full of imagery. And so the inhale doesn't always have to be a close your eyes and let me guide you. It can be a really powerful, like we're standing and the lava is coming up from the center of the earth, up through our bodies and up through the top of our heads. And we take an enormous inhale and we exhale and let that lava flow down the mountain. And it can work for you in whatever. The idea is that it's something you can access. Whatever the access is, that's your practice of storytelling and improvising and breathwork and mindfulness, sort of all in one. And your singers and your everybody in your room gets to experience this creative way of thinking and imagining all those components of energizing our bodies and readying ourselves to engage in in the practice of making music. I also love to do, I learned this from a friend and colleague of mine, dear friend and colleague of mine, who I love her practice of describe your instrument using one word. And I've seen her facilitate this in space where you say, my blank is blank. My voice is joy. And what I love about, and you can see some of the examples here that I put, what I love about that is I think that it empowers the voice, particularly the less experienced, the more beginner voice, because in those beginning stages, we can often um, find ourselves believing things that aren't true, right? About, well, my voice is very, very timid or very small or very, I don't know, my voice is not really, it's just, I'm here, I like it, but that person has a louder voice than me. I know I dealt with some of my own um, of that as a young singer. Just recently, I had an adult singer come to me, having joined the church choir for the first time just to try it out because a friend, as in her words, she said, my friend dragged me here. Um, but she said, and she was in her late 60s, she said she had not sung since she was 10 years old because her sister told her that she wasn't able to sing and she didn't have a good voice. And at the end of that rehearsal, she came up to me and she said, I feel like I am truly and legitimately working through some trauma in a positive way after this experience, but I've been afraid to sing for literally decades. And so in those early moments, or in the later moments in our adult choirs, in our older choirs, can we reaffirm for them that it is not just about my voice is operatic or my violin is playing a concerto, but my voice is mine. My voice is joy. My voice is gentle. My voice is joyous. My voice is powerful. And again, exploring what power can mean, that is not just about volume or is not just about belting for our teenagers who might be, aspiring to become, to have their voice be something that they are celebrating in someone else over what they can celebrate in themselves. So the describe your instrument using one word can be really powerful at lots of different stages of our journeys with our singers. And repertoire. So taking all of these beautiful ideas of how we can have a lot of different practices to set ourselves in power and intention and mindfulness and focus so that we're setting up for that beginning, beginning our journey or re-beginning our journey. I cannot state enough, and repertoire could and will, be and continue to be in our professional development spaces a constant and shared and continued, discovery. But the repertoire you select must echo and reaffirm and celebrate the artistic values you hold for yourself and for your musicians, your youngest singers, and your adult community choir that are amateurs that do struggle with SATB repertoire, maybe. They deserve you're digging deep for the really quality repertoire that upholds where they are and what they are doing. That can be hard. It's hard to find, the thing that feels like the gem, let alone a whole program's worth. But I really encourage you to dig deep so that all of this beautiful work you're doing also meets them where they're at with repertoire, but but looks for things that are artistically appropriate for them and sophisticated and relevant and just kind of, as I said, uphold all of those values that show them, yeah, and now you get to do this really incredible piece of music. Some of the most stunning pieces are in unison, and sometimes unison is the hardest thing to sing beautifully and in tune and all of those things. So being really intentional with your repertoire is such a foundational principle of working with, our singers, so that they know that right now they are celebrated with this real music. And I showed you earlier adult singers, and I show you here 3 and 4-year-olds who, just by the very nature of having matching sashes and a backdrop, just allowed them to feel elevated. They felt, you know, like, oh, first of all, I'm singing this famous, wonderful piece of music that feels really special to sing. And I also get to sit up here with, a dark room in the audience and lights on me and these matching sashes that looked so beautiful and this backdrop that kind of gives us a little bit of a set. And those things all uphold high artistic value as well. And in that spirit, I want to share that I am a big proponent of celebrating the now, that we are all like exactly where we need to be, that there is magic in the here and now of whatever stage you're in. And we must lead our singers to see that, so that they know that if I'm 8, I'm not waiting someday to be in the real choir in high school. And that's where all these other things come into play, and the repertoire selection and all those things. I'm not in training. I'm not in a training choir. I'm in a real choir right now. This choir is a group of people singing. I'm in a group of people, I'm singing, and that's what we're doing here. And so I'm in the here and now, and what makes this magic, so that I can find a healthy balance of aspiring to the thing, but also loving the thing I'm in, so that when I do move onward toward something different and I do grow up and I do start to sing in a middle school and then high school group, I've been able to look back upon my other choral experiences, not just as, oh, I was a cute kid who sang something, but rather, whoa, I learned something really valuable there that I carried with me all the way through high school and even college. And I know that that can be, again, sometimes hard to discover. What are those moments and those values? But those high artistic factors to be found in every stage is really important, so that we can uphold that no one is waiting to arrive at artistry, that all of us right here, right now are artists, and that beginners are artists as well. And so I ask you to reconsider as we wrap up whether you consider yourself an artist and to what degree, and what are some ways that you can move forward from this session today to cultivate your own artistry, so that you can guide your beginning and intermediate singers in a way that is artistically forward, that the artistry is what is most forward.